Hello, my lovely friends, and welcome to season 2 of In the Shadows. While I work on the first actual episode of season 2, I thought I would share some personal stories from my current home. Close friends have already heard these stories because I do like to share them as often as I'm able to, and since I do love to share tales of what I experience, I thought, why not share the delights of those same thrills and chills that I myself experienced? I will say that my house isn't very old. It was built back in the 60s, so it does have some mileage to it, but not enough to make someone assume that it would be haunted. In fact, I think it was almost a year before I actually experienced anything supernatural. When I had my first experience, I was married, and it was pretty common for my ex-husband to stay up really late. Sometimes he wouldn't come to bed till past 1 o'clock. And because I was so used to him going to bed at such a late hour, I would be in a deep sleep whenever he did finally come to bed. One particular night, I woke up just a bit past midnight and stumbled my way to the restroom. On my way past our dark office where our computer sat, I noticed that my husband was hunched over his computer. I could hear the movement and the click of the mouse each time it moved, and I heard his fingers tapping away on the keys for a few seconds. I could even see the light from the monitor illuminating him. It was a completely different story a couple of minutes later when I came back down that same hallway and noticed that the office was completely black and his computer was off. My first assumption was he'd heard me going past and decided it was time to go to bed. And yet, when I saw him in the bed fast asleep, I had to second guess my assumption. My ex has sleep apnea, and he has a bulky face mask that he has to put on every night. Because of the bulkiness of that mask, he would have to finagle it over his mouth and nose and hope that he wouldn't pull a mustache hair. That could take a good minute on its own. Then, of course, there was also getting the machine turned on and to the right level, and then he would have to adjust his pillows, of course. All in all, it could take him a good 5 to 10 minutes before he was comfortable enough to lie down and attempt to go to sleep. I was gone from the bedroom maybe 3 to 4 minutes tops. I can't imagine how he could have gotten to the bedroom and gotten comfortable and fallen into a deep sleep in that time. I also know that I wasn't groggy, and I definitely wasn't sleepy enough that I just imagined or even dreamt what I saw. Feeling a tingle of panic, I woke him up and asked him, "When did you come to bed?" Naturally, he was upset at being woken up against his will, and he told me, "I came to bed a little after 10 o'clock. Why?" I told him exactly what I had seen and what I had heard. His response was a sleepy, "Well, it wasn't me," and then he rolled over and dozed back off. Sleep, on the other hand, eluded me for the remainder of that night. I haven't experienced anything of that nature since my ex left, and I wonder if whatever that was decided to leave with him. If so, I'm rather grateful. But it wasn't long after that when I experienced my first encounter with the lady. It was late evening, and I was getting ready for bed when I happened to see what looked like a woman out of the corner of my eye. It was perhaps a second's glance, but in that time frame, I saw a young, slender woman with long, flowing, whitish blonde hair. But because it was only a second's glance, I second-guessed myself and thought, I'm imagining things, thought nothing more about it, and went on to bed. Many months later, I would see her again, and this time I couldn't second-guess myself. As before, I was getting ready for bed, folding a few towels and putting them away, when I happened to glance up and I saw her again. This time, the woman who passed by the door was older. She had long white flowing hair, and she was wearing a white nightgown. It wasn't just that I saw her moving past the door, it was that I actually saw her face and thought that she smiled at me. And believe me, I do know how that sounds. Even saying it now, I feel a little bit crazy. But I promise you, it did feel like she was smiling at me. I was completely frozen in place, and all I could think to do was call out, "Hello? Is somebody there?" There was no response from the lady, but the door moved. It creaked forward by almost an inch, paused for a good few seconds, and then went backwards again, rested against the wall, and then moved forward again. And you might tell yourself, this was likely the air conditioner causing this response. except that door has never moved when the air conditioner is on. It happened about 5 or 6 times before I finally decided, you know what? I think I've done enough for tonight. I really should go to bed. I heard a woman's voice behind me, and I couldn't say what it was that she said, only that I heard it. Perhaps it was the lady saying a gentle good night, who's to say? But after that surprise occurrence, I began to hear the lady and the stranger talking. I would only hear them in the evening time. They would always be in a different room from where I was. Their voices were soft murmurs, and I could never make out exactly what they were saying. If I dared to go near or even go into the room I thought that they were in, they would immediately stop. I even tried recording it on my camera as well as a voice recorder. The voice recorder luckily picked up voices, but even then it was difficult to understand what it was they were saying. I eventually gave up in frustration. This next part of the story is why I called the unknown man the stranger. Again, it was late at night and I was in bed. I was reading to get myself relaxed enough to go to sleep. I have 3 dogs that sleep in my bed. It's important to point this out because each of them raised their heads and looked to the exact same corner when we each heard a deep breath being drawn in. The sound came from the head of the bed on the right side, where nothing was whatsoever. The only thing on the outside of that wall is brick. My 3 dogs and I stared at the corner of that room in fascination as, a minute later, there was a deep exhale of breath, very male in sound. And since I have no men in my house, it's very safe to say I could not explain where this sound was coming from. Almost 2 minutes later, I could hear the deep inhale of what sounded like a man taking that deep, gasping breath again. And again, a minute later, he exhaled. It only happened twice, and my dogs and I continued to stare. They lost interest faster than I did, because I was still staring at that corner for almost 5 minutes, waiting to hear it again. Like a child, I tucked my bed sheets as close around my body as I could, and I held on to my book for most of the night. Luckily, I would never hear that sound again. As innocuous as that was, it unsettled me far more than what the lady did to me. This happened perhaps 1.5 to 2 years ago, and when I think of it, it gives me a chuckle. The lady is definitely a bit of a prankster, and I see that from her from time to time. What started as me hearing her voice or seeing a glimpse of her turned into random objects occasionally moving. It isn't as though they were suddenly lost and I would never find them. The objects were just temporarily moved and they were easily found within the hour. One evening in particular, she had a sudden interest in the television remote. It was getting late in the day, so I turned the television off. I had locked the front door and was going to the kitchen so I could clean a few things up, and that's when I heard the clatter of the remote hitting the floor. At first, I wasn't sure what the noise was as I went to investigate, but I happened to notice the remote at the foot of my couch, just lying there. Usually I have it at the end table. There's no way the remote could have easily fallen off. First of all, it was securely on the table. There was nothing between it and the table, and there is a border around the table to keep things from easily falling off of it. So I had no real explanation as to how it got on the floor. I picked it up, I set it back on the end table, and went back to the kitchen with my continued plans of setting everything to right before bed when I heard the clatter of the remote falling again on the floor. Immediately, I turned around and looked for the remote, but it wasn't at the front of the couch. This time, the remote was behind the couch. I'll have to explain that my living room is rather large and open, and there's a slight incline that leads from it into the open dining room, and then there's a slight curve and a wall in between the living room and the kitchen. You have to go on that slight curve from the living room into the dining room and into the kitchen. The way my couch sits, the back is to the dining room area, and the remote was sitting there right behind the couch. Again, I picked it up and I set it on the table, but this time I asked, "Are you wanting to watch the television? If you are, just give me a sign and I will be glad to turn it back on." I waited a bit over a minute and then I went back to the kitchen so I could finish everything that I needed to. And when I came back out from the kitchen, there was the remote sitting there between the living room and the dining room on that incline. I took that as my sign and turned the TV back on. I left Golden Girls playing for her and headed down the very dark hallway that leads to my bedroom. Behind me, the television turned off and the remote came clattering down that very same hallway towards me. Maybe it was the television show, or maybe she just wanted a little bit of solitude. Whatever it was, I decided, I think I'm done for the night. I'm just going to go to bed. I'll leave everything else until the morning. And sure enough, in the morning, the remote was waiting there in the hallway for me. I picked it up and set it on the end table where it usually sits. Nothing like that has ever happened again. There was another time that I did hear the lady speak to me, and this one, again, is an amusing situation. I believe it was Halloween night, 2023. I had watched a few spooky movies, so maybe that's why, when I finished with the last movie, I gathered up my blankets and called over my shoulder to the empty living room, "Good night, house." There was a very soft but sweet "good night" behind me. I turned around and, of course, there's nobody there. I can only think the lady was getting a final chuckle out of the evening. After all, I was watching frightening supernatural movies, and there I have a spirit in my actual house. I'm sure she was standing there with disbelief, thinking, you have an actual ghost here, and you're scared of fake ghost on a television screen? For a time, I would only hear hints of her voice, or I would see a glance of her. I think her interest in her activity with me decreased for a while. From time to time, I would hear her having those quiet conversations with a stranger, and I assumed that would be it, nothing more than that. This last story, however, makes me wonder if she's completely done with me. I can't say that it was her. Maybe it was the stranger. It's hard to say. I have a dual set of cabinets in my bathroom, one top, one bottom. The top part has a lot more space and it has shelving, whereas the bottom area is nothing but a simple square, and I tend to keep only cleaning supplies in there and use it for nothing else, whereas I keep my blankets in the upper part. Oddly enough, this story takes place in the middle of the day. I was in another part of the house with anticipation of a storm coming in. I heard a decided banging sound coming from the bathroom and rushed to find out what exactly had happened. My assumption was that one of the heavier blankets had tumbled forward against the door and it had put too much pressure against it and knocked it open. But it was one of the bottom doors that had popped open and had slammed against the wall. As I said, I keep my cleaning supplies down there, so there was nothing that could fall over easily and knock that door open. All the same, I checked the cabinet area, closed the door, and I went back to prepping for the incoming storm whenever I heard that door pop open again with a louder slam. This time I decided I wasn't checking on that door. I was more interested in the storm that was coming in with violent winds and possible hail and making sure that everything was secured outside. Whichever spirit it was not pleased with me ignoring them, and they let me know by slamming that door against the wall twice more. I was more frustrated than scared and called out to whoever it was, "There is a storm coming in, and my attention is on making sure everything is secured. I know that you want my attention right now, but I cannot give it to you." There was a softer slam. Hours later, once I had made sure everything was secured, I went to go investigate and saw that the spirit had closed the door. This is one of those circumstances that has not happened again, yet. There's no telling what may happen in the future with these two spirits, and they are always doing something around the house. For all I know, tomorrow the lady may decide that she needs to say hello, and she may decide that my keys just aren't in the right spot. Or maybe my dogs and I will hear the stranger breathing heavily in my bedroom again in his creepy, lengthy way. Or maybe the largest of my 3 dogs will again notice something moving around the room and stare at it for a while, as she's prone to do from time to time. Whatever it is they do decide to do, I'm going to enjoy sharing that story of how my spirits shocked and startled me again. And I think we all know there's always going to be another again. I do thank you, my dear friends, for coming to visit me again and listening to my entertaining stories. Maybe you got a thrill or a chill. At least I certainly hope you did. And as I've promised, I will have the actual episode 1 up for you, hopefully within the next month. I'm having difficulty writing the first episode because it's a very sensitive story for me, but it is also one that I've wanted to share. But for now, my dearest friends, I'm going to wish you a good night, sleep tight, and don't let the ghouls bite.